Have you noticed that the attempts to bury the Nintendo Switch 2 failed miserably? This is something that I talked about back in June of 2025, not even a full month after the Nintendo Switch 2 had came out, but the sales numbers dropped. And obviously, many millions, in fact, were rushing out to go buy the Nintendo Switch 2 when many people online and content creators told me and told the world that nobody wants this thing, that Nintendo's the worst company ever, that they're doing just the worst things ever, and that nobody should buy this system. And there's so many problems. All of the different mixed messaging, all the different problems, the Doug Bowser situation, everything that people brought up to try to bury this system completely fell flat. And now that we're 10 months plus going into a year, I wanted to discuss what's going on here. But remember, there were so many content creators out there that were telling me, calling me names, calling other people names, just being crazy for simply people being excited about the Nintendo Switch 2. Or even, for example, trading in their own equipment to get a Nintendo Switch 2, or trading in a different system, or whatever the case is. Now, a year later, before Nintendo's investor meeting out at this point, before the fiscal year end, I can easily say right now that I was right. Of course, I've talked about it multiple times, but I'm going to say it again for this video. Switch 2, obviously the fastest selling system of all time in the first 7 months. Best selling system in Japan right now. And when it comes to the US, it's also the best selling system for the year. And it's constantly talked about just as much, if not more, than PlayStation and Xbox. Nintendo collectively also sells more consoles per month with the Nintendo Switch 1 and the Nintendo Switch 2 easily than any other console out there. So things are going pretty good. But today we're going to discuss exactly what is happening and also a bit more interesting things that you might have missed. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to sit there and say Nintendo's perfect at everything, because trust me, they are not. The $80 Mario Kart thing, for example, that's a problem. I think they should lower the price on that one. But right now, Nintendo has morphed into probably the most consumer-friendly company out of the big three, between them, Microsoft, and Sony. And I'm going to explain to you guys why. But before we continue on, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2. All you have to do to enter is hit that subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed, and drop a comment below. We are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 once we hit 150,000 subscribers, and it will be random. So the more that you actually comment and interact, the better chance that you have to win. Hit that like button, click that notification bell, and let's go ahead and jump right back into it. Let's talk about exclusives. Exclusives are important, and I don't know why people try to downplay exclusives. Exclusives really help sell your system. You need exclusives to show the appeal of the system. There are certain things that can only be done on this platform, that you can only get on this platform, and that shows like, oh wow, I might want to go out there and get that platform. A game like Pokemon Pocopia, for example, was huge. It was one of the big reasons why Nintendo finished out the fiscal year here in March so strong. We saw that Pocopia was a massive system seller. It helped push Nintendo Switch 2 sales, according to Matt Piscatella of Circana, to over 570,000 units for the month of March just here in the US. That's more than January and February combined, plus 50%. Exclusives help push that. People see, wow, I can get this Pokemon game that's coming up here with Pokemon Pocopia, and then next year there's Pokemon Winds and Waves, and oh, I can pick up Metroid Prime, or I can pick up Mario Kart, or Donkey Kong, or Zelda, or Animal Crossing, or Splatoon, or any of these other franchises that are coming out that Nintendo usually has consistently good games. You need exclusives to sell the system. There are some people that tried to push this thing, especially with Microsoft going away from exclusives, that no, you don't need those to sell it. You've got to sell Game Pass, and you've got to sell an all digital system. That's what people want. No, it's not. The Xbox Series is getting trounced right now. It's getting trounced even by the Nintendo Switch 1 by the estimates that system is doing worse than. So the Nintendo Switch 2 has completely obliterated the Xbox Series. That system does not have exclusives. And so far, right now, if you look at the exclusives and what Nintendo does and the quality of those exclusives, that's the reason why they're able to compete and even go above PlayStation in many ways, despite not getting all of the third-party games that PlayStation gets, because there still are a number of games that skip Nintendo Switch 2, yet it can still sell at the level, if not above, what PlayStation does. And they showed that all throughout the Nintendo Switch 1 era, that the exclusives, along with third-party support here and there, not saying that you don't need third-party support, but the exclusives help propel the system to the point where the Nintendo Switch 1 has outsold every single PlayStation system with the exception of the PlayStation 2, but it's right there hot on the heels of that system and could ultimately end up passing it up. And it did not get all of the third-party support that some of the other best-selling systems have gotten. So exclusives help bolster that. Exclusives help make the system appealing and get more people excited to pick it up. So that's very important right now. And that is a pro-consumer thing. You want to see great exclusives. You want to see cool single-player games, multiplayer games, all different types of games. That's good for the consumers out there. But another thing is that the lies from content creators actually helped more than they hurt. It brought about discussion. It brought about people talking about things. It brought about a lot of people just discussing and free marketing and advertising for the Nintendo Switch 2. A lot of content creators lied and said all sorts of stuff, and we're making up things about the Nintendo Switch 2, and still even to this point do when it comes to the sales numbers. That's something that some content creators have been doing, and anytime that they get the opportunity, like that weird fake kind of story from Takahashi Mochizuki, everybody will pounce on it. And then later we get the sales numbers and it shows that, yeah, that was all BS. Nintendo doesn't talk about production cuts and all that. We have no way of knowing any of that type of stuff. All we know is that their projection says 19 million. They sold 17 million by the end of last year, and they're probably going to hit that 19 million by the end of March pretty easily. That's all we know. But we're seeing that it's still selling the best worldwide. So the lies and the weird sales stuff that some people tried to push, I think, in my opinion, that actually helped people looking up more information, seeing what the system was actually about, and finding out for themselves that, hey, you know what, this is actually not what some of these people are saying, and a lot of this stuff is being pushed for clickbait. Now, for the people that are actually doing legitimate critique and all that, I did that myself. I'm not talking about you, so don't get offended if you think that I'm going after you. I'm not. I'm talking about the people who lied in videos or stretched the truth about sales numbers and other things simply to game the algorithm, and a lot of their videos end up looking pretty silly now at this point. Now, I would say this is probably one of the major things that people try to downplay or even gaslight you on, that firing people isn't anti-consumer, that it's just fine, it doesn't matter. The fact that Nintendo retains their people, doesn't shutter studios when it comes to a game maybe not selling as well, and the fact that Microsoft and Sony do this, they try to gaslight you, or they try to tell you, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal, or, oh, well, I'm sorry that that happened. No, that is anti-consumer. Let me explain to you why firing and shuttering studios is anti-consumer. We all play games for the games. Who makes the games? The people, the developers. If you are Microsoft, for example, and you have a game like Perfect Dark, and you used Perfect Dark, which they did, to try to sell the Xbox Series, and you made a brand new team, and you brought in all sorts of developers, and you're saying, hey, we're gonna have Perfect Dark, and it's gonna be a great game, and we've hired all these people, the initiative, you got a cool name and all of that. So as a gamer, you're excited for that, because you've been waiting decades for a new Perfect Dark game. And then we get all the way up to one point, Microsoft shows it, then they cancel the game and they completely shutter the studio. That is anti-consumer. You proposed a product for the consumers and completely snatched the rug right out from underneath us with that product. Do not let anybody try to tell you that shuttering studios and firing developers isn't insanely anti-consumer. It is, especially if you are trying to sell the system, or if you've sold the system on certain games. You can't tell me that it's not anti-consumer when we all thought that we got incredible remakes like Shadow of the Colossus from Blue Point Games, and when Sony purchased them after Demon's Souls remake, we were all expecting Sony to employ them, to purchase them, to make awesome remakes that can fill the gaps in between the big new games. Instead, Sony decided to tell them to make a live service game, or Bluepoint said we're going to do that because of Sony's weird initiative, and it ultimately ended up in us getting absolutely nothing from Bluepoint Games, despite us supporting Bluepoint Games for years and us thinking that we were going to get quality exclusives or quality remakes in the time period from 2020 or so, or 2021, till up until when Bluepoint got shut down, and we received nothing. That is anti-consumer. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It will always be anti-consumer, and it does not help the consumer to have less developers working on things, or for the developers that are still remaining after the layoffs, they get discouraged. They don't know if they're next. How can you do your best job if you're always looking over your shoulder? The situation from a mental perspective on when you could be fired at any time. They're just talking. So I think that's the biggest thing that we have to make sure that we say. Firing developers, shuttering games and studios, and doing all sorts of stuff like that is anti-consumer and hurts the gamers, especially when it's a good game or a good studio that gets let go and they're not able to show us what they have for us when it comes to games. So that is huge and anti-consumer, and people are noticing that Nintendo doesn't do that. Now, here's another thing, guys. People are starting to notice the price hikes. The price hikes are starting to come in, and people are like, well, wait a minute, hold up. We've been conditioned to believe that Nintendo's the most greedy, and they are upping the price, and they're doing all this different type of stuff. And if you look at it, Microsoft and Sony are upping the prices more than anything. Sony, for example, has upped the price of the PlayStation 5 multiple times. They've got it to the point to where at launch in 2020, I bought 2 PlayStation 5s, one for myself, one for my wife. And now at this point, it's $150 more for that same disc-based PlayStation 5 that I bought. If you bought an all-digital PlayStation 5 in 2020, it's $200 more. Heck, if you bought a PlayStation 5 Pro in 2025, which I did, I bought it for $700, it's $200 more now. And at this point, in just 1 year's time or so, it's increased by $200 for the PS5 Pro. PSN has also went up. And remember, to access the normal online multiplayer games for any games that aren't free to play, the minimum on PlayStation is $80 a year with the PlayStation Plus Essential. So that is kind of pricey if you're talking about just playing FC or Madden or NBA 2K online. It's minimum $80 a year. Microsoft also did multiple price hikes as well with the Xbox Series. So you're looking at it and you're like, wait a minute, they're hiking up the prices higher than what the Switch 2 is, while everyone was telling you how greedy and how bad Switch 2 price was. And you're like, wait a minute, hold up, Switch 2, you can play games anywhere, comes with the dock, comes with the Joy-Con controllers, can play split Joy-Con right there, multiplayer right out of the box. And that's $450. Now, the price could go up, which is something that people have stated that could happen. I think it could go up as well. But even then, it's still going to be something to where it's probably going to be cheaper than a PlayStation and Xbox Series. So I think that when it comes to it, people are noticing that a lot of the other companies are hiking up prices quite a bit. But I hope that Nintendo keeps the prices down. And once again, they've got to lower the price. In my opinion, they should lower the price of Mario Kart World to $70, $60 with their new digital tier pricing. So I do think that should happen. Now, here's another thing. Switch 2 fixed so many problems that the Nintendo Switch 1 had. A lot of consumers are also noticing that. The biggest issue with Switch 1 was not the fact that it didn't have graphics the level of PS4 or Xbox One. The biggest problem was that a lot of Nintendo's own games had frame rate and graphics resolution problems. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, for example. There was a lot of issues with some of those Switch 1 games that Nintendo put out themselves and third parties. With the Switch 2, yeah, it's not perfect when it comes to third-party developers, but it's significantly better than what it was on the Nintendo Switch 1, and you can see that with the early third-party support. But from a first-party standpoint, pretty much all of Nintendo's games are running at 60 FPS, or more like targeting 60 FPS. So that is absolutely good to see. The biggest issue was the frame rate and resolution for many people. The graphics are already good enough for so many people out there. Like, photorealism is not what everybody wants. A lot of gamers just want something that's fun to play. We already live in real life. We don't have to see all our games look like real life. So that's the thing that I've noticed, why a lot of people are just like, yeah, it's fine. Like, I don't need to have a PS5 Pro or the most $5,000 PC to play everything in hyper realism. Like, I can just play this Switch 2 and play Tomodachi Life. That's even a Switch 1 game. But I can play Animal Crossing or Pocopia and be just as engaged as anything else. So that's the thing with Switch 2, is that it's fixing a lot of those issues to where on Switch 1, a game like Pocopia would probably run at 30 frames per second with all sorts of crazy dips, like we saw with Dragon Quest Builders 2 on the Nintendo Switch 1. So it's definitely hitting at least that, and that's why a lot of gamers are saying, wait a minute, this is pretty good, because most of the stuff coming out is targeting 60, especially from the marquee games, the big first party titles. We can even get into the craziness that people were trying to spin when it comes to handheld PCs, despite none of these handheld PCs having any knowledgeable or big sales numbers. People tried to push this nonsense that handheld PCs were going to be some type of stopping factor to the Switch 2, most infamously IGN and their article, which, by the way, they still have not made a follow-up to that article. And the reason why I point this out is because if, let's just say, for example, Switch 2 didn't do as well as it's doing and handheld PCs did do great, they would have made a million follow-up articles by now talking about how doomed Nintendo is, and there would have been all sorts of articles on that. But since the Switch 2's absolutely obliterating handheld PCs, and it's not even close, Steam Deck included, everyone wants to go silent on that handheld PC's going to take over stuff, which I thought was just interesting. But yes, all of you guys that were trying to say that, y'all were really wrong about that, which I already knew from the beginning that handheld PCs weren't going to be able to match what Nintendo was going to do because of all this stuff that we're talking about here. Now, another thing here is that the game prices have also started to trend a bit downward with Nintendo's new digital physical pricing plan. When it comes to variable pricing, at least, it's actually a bit cheaper to get something like Splatoon Raiders. It's $50 digital, $60 physical. Now, Nintendo did this all throughout the Switch 1 era with the voucher program and the gold points, even if you weren't part of NSO, because you needed to be part of NSO to take advantage of the voucher program, which got you 2 games for $100 instead of $120. So it saved you $20 on games. But once again, you had to be part of NSO. But the gold point program was anytime that you bought a digital game, doesn't matter what it was, whether it was first party or third party or anything, it got you cash back that you can use for future purchases. So digital was always cheaper than physical when it comes to just straight up MSRP or anything like that. Now, obviously there's digital sales, there's physical sales at different retailers, but for the most part, digital always had it to where, okay, you could probably save a bit more if you're always buying digital. But now at this point, they've just built that into the actual games. It's just, okay, Splatoon Raiders MSRP 60, digital 50. Same thing with Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, MSRP 70 physical, 60 digital. So I'm hoping that Nintendo continues with this and they don't make the mistake when it comes to the $80 game like Mario Kart World. Don't do 80, 70. Don't do that. Please keep it to where it's at least 70, 60 or 60, 50, or maybe even lower than that. You know, when it comes to some of the smaller games like Rhythm Heaven is $40, for example. So people are starting to notice that, wait a minute, this is actually pro-consumer with stuff like the variable pricing with the digital physical split, because digital games theoretically should be cheaper than physical games, because with the physical game, you've got to produce the cartridge, you've got to ship it out, you have the retailer space, you have the box, you have the art that you have to print out, you have all those things, but with digital games, you don't. Now, you do have server fees with digital games, and I don't know the prices between that, but I don't think it's as much as actually having to ship out all of the different games. So people are starting to notice that Nintendo's having some good game prices with the upcoming games, and all of the other things that I talked about here, between exclusives, between people kind of sniffing out the lies from weird content creators looking to grift, and of course people noticing the price hikes when it comes to Xbox and PlayStation. So I'm not saying Nintendo's perfect over everything else. I'm not saying that Microsoft and Sony are bad or they're like the worst thing ever. I have Xbox Series, I have PlayStation. I'm just telling you why you're seeing this big shift of people buying Switch 2 and why I was actually right about that even from last year when people were telling me that I'm wrong. So what do you guys think about everything that I talked about here? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, peeps, that wraps it up for this one here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.